Greetings from the Mosel. Thank you for joining us today. Today's topic is Alte Reben, as we call it in Germany. It means old vines. Very often winemakers put the word old vines or Alte Reben or vieille vigne in French or vigna vecchia on the label. What does it mean? I mean, when is a vine old and what is so good about a vine being old? Well, old vines usually carry less grapes. They're not as vigorous anymore, and that's a very elegant way of achieving lower yields and more concentrated, powerful wines. But also, it's not just that age. It is also the fact that when you have an old vineyard, usually the vintner had to replace old vines that died off and replace it by a young vine. So you have many different ages of vines in your parcel, in your vineyard, and that creates a certain complexity because each vine of each age and also of each origin, depending on where it is from, the plant producer might be different every time there was a replanting. You have different genetic origin, you have different age, different vigorosity. It's not as homogeneous, it's more complex. And this results into a more complex wine. If you look at the grapes from an old vine, a younger vine, a vine that was where the plant was bought in the nursery further away or a nursery further or closer by, you have a different genetic origin, a different appearance of the grape, different flavors maybe. It's still Riesling here in the Mosel, but you have a different taste of each grapes from each vine. And that's the great thing about the variety of ages and variety of genetic origin in an old vineyard. Old vines also root deep, which means you could call it a root tree underneath the surface in the earth. It is much larger than of a young vine and wider and more branched, and it reaches also lower regions in the earth where you have a better water supply. The roots reach more minerals and more nutritions. So old vines are usually better supplied with anything the vine takes from the soil. And then old vines tend to have more loosened berries, loosened bunches. They tend not to get botrytized as much. The grapes stay healthy much longer, so you can have a longer hang time. You can leave the grapes on the vines for a longer time. In general, people say a vine is an old vine once it is older than 25 years. I think that is still a bit young. For me, old vines start after 40 years, because 40 years would be the time when a vintner who has a parcel that has a stable productivity, when a vintner replaces the entire parcel, he would go and take everything out because the vines are less productive, less yield stable. And then he replants the entire parcel. He has to wait 3 years until the young vines bring grapes again. But then he has a quite productive vineyard that brings stable yield, stable crop year after year. In the Mosel, in the steep slopes, where it's fairly hard to do an entire replanting because it's very steep and because it's a lot of work, usually people do what I call eternal viticulture. They only replace a vine once it has died off, and then they replace it by a young vine. And that's how you get this complexity with different ages of vines and different origin or different habits, one could call it. So this is what old vines is all about. It's not just the age of the vine, it's also the fact that in an old vineyard you have so much variation and you get such complex wines from that. Well, I hope this made the topic of old vines a bit clearer to you, and I thank you for being with us again today, and greetings from the Mosel.